So we're gonna get right into this one. We're gonna be installing the Starlight headliner. And you're gonna need a fiber optic kit. So this one got on Amazon, and I'll link this down in the description. And I've already opened this up, tested it, made sure everything works, but comes with a controller, does not come with a battery, so you're gonna need that. And this one takes a 2032 style battery. It'll come with a regular plug-in if you're gonna be installing this in the house. The light engine. This one is RGB and also has the twinkle effect. You got the fiber optic cable. The other thing is it comes with a cigarette lighter adapter, but what we're gonna end up doing is we're just gonna cut the end of this, splice the wires, and run a fuse in line with this, and then run this to a power source. That is everything that comes with this kit. And this was, I believe, $150. There's much cheaper ones, and I haven't tested any other ones. This is the first one that I've gotten. This is the first time doing this kind of install. For the effect that we're going for, and $150, I mean, seems worth it to me. So this one was the 550 piece kit, 3/4 of a millimeter strands for the fiber optic cable. So they're all the same size. Now, I haven't gone through and counted all these, which I'm probably going to do just so I can accurately map out how many I'm gonna put in, where I'm gonna put them, and everything else like that. This headliner already has like a grid pattern set up, which is kind of nice, so I can count out how many of those are on here, figure out the area that I'm gonna put these in, and then figure out how many of these will go in each square, and then just kind of randomly put it. That way it's as organized as possible. All right, so I just went through and counted all of these for you guys. And I'm happy to report there is actually, I mean, give or take a few, just in case if I miscounted at all, but I counted 560, and it's a 550 piece kit. So it is accurate, at least with this one. There's no power switch on the engine itself, so that's why you need to have this. You need to have the battery, and then we'll go ahead and turn it on. Hey Google, turn off all the lights. Get a little darker in here.
All right, turning 7 lights off.
And this is basically what you guys are going to see in your headliner. It looks sweet on video, watching other people's videos, installing these, putting them in, but then seeing this in person gives you a better idea of how cool it actually is. I mean, there's quite a bit of light coming out of these. Probably not enough to actually light up your interior, but enough to give you enough light if you're in the dark. Probably see something without flipping on a light or anything else like that. Figure out how many will go in each one of these little squares here, and then just start randomly marking dots, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so the drill bit, the smallest one that I have is a 1/16. It's not huge, it's definitely bigger than what I really need. You drill through this, and because of the material and everything else like that, it's not going to be perfectly a 1/16 hole. It may close up a little bit just because the material isn't solid. And the hot glue will hold them in place. So, gonna go through, drill all these out, and start feeding the fiber optic cable through. Okay guys, so just something to be aware of when you are drilling the holes and everything. If you rewrapped your headliner and did it recently, as in last night, the adhesive that you sprayed is still going to be tacky and wet. It's not fully dried. So when you're drilling, your drill bit is going to get all clogged up with the adhesive and then whatever material you're drilling through. It's still working. Just got to commit to it, full power, full speed, in and out. Don't drill in, stop it, and then try to pull it out. And then also hold it on the backside, but don't drill into your hand, obviously. It'll want to kind of push the material down before it actually breaks through it. So if you're going at speed and you're holding it in place, it's not going to pull the headliner away and kind of wreck the work that you just did. If you didn't rewrap your headliner, you don't really need to worry about this, but you can see the holes on the underside of it, which you'll see that in the car too when it's installed. Nobody really shows you a close-up of how these actually look when they're off in the car, if they're super visible or noticeable, so I'll include that in this one just so you get the full effect of it, whether it's on or off. But just a couple little tips just to make sure that you don't screw up the hard work that you just did. So I've probably done 100, so I'm a fifth of the way done. And it's taken a while, but this is the tedious part. And basically what I'm doing is after I'm done feeding through a section, I go underneath and I pull them through. That way they're not only sticking out like that far, they're sticking out about a foot. That way they're less likely to pull out. And when I get done with like a row, I just tape it together just to keep everything tidy, out of the way, and that helps me kind of keep it separate from the rest of the loom. So I'm gonna just go ahead, bust out the rest of this. You get the general idea, and then as soon as I get the rest of them in, I'll figure out the length that I need that to be in order to feed the end of it someplace hidden in the trunk, and give me enough to work with, but also not too much so there's a bunch of excess I gotta try to find a spot for. So I will see you guys here in a little bit. All right, so apparently I didn't make enough dots, so I have to go through and make about 50 more, give or take. It's pretty much done as far as feeding the wires through. This will give you a better idea of how it actually looks. And then once they're all hot glued, you just trim them flush and it's gonna look pretty sick. But you can see, I think you can see on the video, the twinkle effect. Okay, so a couple little tips and tricks after doing this to make it much easier on yourself. Once, if you just go through and just start sticking them through, even if you think that you're doing it pretty organized, once you go to pull them all through so that you can adjust the length of this, it's going to get all jumbled up, and you don't want to really kink these because then they're not going to shine as bright as what they should. So before you start actually putting them through all the holes, separate these into like chunks of 50 or 100, tape them together like this, and then start on one end and then just work your way down. That way everything is kind of sectioned off and organized. So when you go to pull them through, all the ones on this side are coming from this strand and this strand, not just randomly throughout it. It'll just make your life a lot easier. Each one has been hot glued. Don't go stingy with the hot glue, it's cheap and everything. So put a decent amount on each one. And don't just put it around it, barely holding these in. Go kind of up the cable a little bit, just so you make sure that it really holds it. Because once you clip it, there's a tiny little bit of cable that's actually being in the headrest, and it'd be really easy for it to just pop out, and you don't want a bunch of these pulling out over time or right away, especially when you're trying to route this cable and everything. You're going to be putting some tension on them. So another thing you can do too is like figure out where you're going to put the cable and try to secure it to the back side of the headliner, either using tape or something else like that, just so this all stays exactly how it is right now. But I'm going to go ahead, flip it over, and then use a pair of fingernail clippers and start clipping each individual strand. So I got a little over half of it trimmed. It's not actually taking all that long. This is probably like the least tedious part of doing this whole thing, which is nice because this is the final stretch. But just wanted to plug it in and see how it actually looks with it trimmed, how it's going to look in the car, and here we go. It looks so good. And like this, I can run my hand on it. There's a couple little spots that I need to trim. There's this one that's a little long, but once you get done, you go through, just feel it, make sure there's no sharp edges or anything else like that, and then just trim it down a little bit. This is cushioned, so there's a bit of give, so you can kind of push it down, or push the fingernail clip down to get it even lower. The ones that are kind of almost behind the suede, after I clipped it, it's not just like sitting flush, it's kind of hidden behind fabric. Even those ones you can still see through, like this one right here. All these ones are behind the fabric, but you can still see it, which actually gives it a much better effect. It's almost like getting the kit that has the different thickness strands. So you have ones that look like really bright stars and ones that look like they're like super far away. So it gives it that effect, which is really cool. The twinkle effect is awesome, and I think Carissa is absolutely going to love this. All right guys, so headliner's done. Now it's time to get it back in the car. So I'm gonna kind of map out how I'm gonna route the cables. They are gonna go through the passenger side into the trunk area, and then figure out a good spot to actually mount the engine, whether it be in the trunk somewhere or behind that rear panel. And then I have to run wiring to get it hooked up to power and everything else, because I'm not going to use the cigarette lighter. And I also just want to double check everything, how it's going to go in, just so I can have a plan of how I'm going to put it all in so everything goes smoothly. Okay, right now I'm slowly working on getting the headliner back in. The headliner is in here, but it's just sitting right now. So I need to go through and figure out how to reroute everything with the fiber optic cables to ensure that nothing gets hung up on anything, everything fits properly and goes back to where it needs to be. So I'm gonna get this all figured out, and as soon as I get the headliner back in, I will jump back on here with you guys. First test, headliner is kind of back in. I'm just putting everything back together. I have the fiber optic cable ran down through there, had to take a bunch of panels off and loosen them up just so I can get it out. And I have it just coming out right here for now, because I'll be able to tuck everything at a later time. Main goal is to get this headliner in, but we are gonna go ahead and test it out. And it works. Compressors need to calm down. Okay, enough of that. All right, here's just a closer look of where I have it routed right now. This is the rear window. I have it running down here, and then there's enough space to fit all these right through there. And then I just pulled it through right here for now. which I'll clean all this up later, but this is just so I can get the headliner back in. Everything went in exactly where it's supposed to. Now I just need to put this panel back on. There's a little corner piece that goes back there. All the trim pieces back in place and where they're supposed to be. Now it's just trying to figure out where to mount the engine so it's out of the way and not in the trunk. I know this doesn't look very pretty from here, but from the other side, that's what people are seeing, so that's what we focus on making look good. But we don't need this lit up and just strung behind everything, so figuring out a place to put that would be ideal. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the rear seat completely, which is actually very simple. So right here at the bottom of the seat, you have a 10mm bolt. You just remove those, and then that will pretty much just allow you to remove the bottom portion of the seat cushion. The top portion, and there may be other ways to do this, it's just what I've figured out from just quick looking at it. If you pull this back with the seat back down, you have a 12mm bolt holding this bracket in. Remove that on both sides, and then you should just be able to pull this back portion off. And with those two bolts removed from the back, tilt the seat back up, and then this will allow you to just pull it and just like that, it's free from the back of the car. Now I'll have my handy dandy assistant grab this for me. So I was thinking, well, maybe underneath the seat or something, but the seat is pretty much molded to the shape of the floor here, so there's actually zero free space. So we'll set that back down. In the trunk, there's wiring and everything else all tucked up underneath here. There's not any space underneath the trunk floor. Okay, so I'm going to show you on the driver's side roughly how to remove that panel, which is actually really easy. So in the back, when you fold down the rear seat, you will have two push clips right here that you'll remove. You don't have to remove the seat back, but it's really simple and it gives you a lot more space to work with, and you don't have to worry about it sitting on everything. So just remove that, two 12mm, then a 10mm here. Remove this bottom seat cushion. That'll give you access to another push clip that is going to be right down here, and then from there pull the weather molding out, grab this bottom portion of the plastic panel and just start popping it out, and it'll be free on the bottom, but keep popping it out all the way around. And then from the back portion or from the front, either which you can start with, but just start pulling this away from the top plastic portions. And then once you get to that point, it's going to look like this, where everything is free. So now you can just pretty much go ahead, get the seat belts out of the way, and this whole thing comes out in one piece. So you have these little clips everywhere, and that's really the only thing that's holding this in place. And once you take that out, look at that, tons of space for me to mount the light engine, and I really don't even have to trim it up. So one thing that nobody ever shows you, and something that you never ever see, so this car obviously is wide body. We have to cut the fenders and everything. You remove this panel and you can see where it's cut and where I put all the seam sealer in there, and there's actually these holes I can see light through. I can actually see the ground outside, so I can only imagine how dirty it is inside of here. But this is good. I can go through and clean it up, fill those holes, seal it from the back side just to make sure it doesn't rust, no moisture gets in or anything else like that. But just thought that was kind of interesting that you can actually see the inside of where we cut the fenders. All right, I went through and I actually reset all the settings in the GoPro as far as the like the Pro Tune settings. So hopefully things aren't as grainy and things look a little bit more clear now, but we will see. So if you see a difference, that is why. Here's what I've decided to do, and maybe kind of shoddy, but it'll do the trick. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to mount this up here behind that panel like this, and I'm just going to throw a couple self-tappers through it. I've already opened this up to make sure that there's nothing behind here that could get damaged. What I'm going to do is I have this little foam block. I'm going to put that in between and send the self-tappers through that, and this will act as kind of sound deadening. Give it something to ride on so it's not just metal on metal. If anything backs out, it's not going to rattle, anything else like that. So keep things from being noisy. But I'm going to go ahead and send it. All right, so that is mounted. Solid, but has a little bit of wiggle room, but that shouldn't make any noise since I put that foam behind it. And I ended up not trimming this because there's plenty of space in here for this to tuck into. Now on the panel that sits here, there is a foam block that sits inside here, but I just tuck that down and then I'll have plenty of space to tuck into there. I'm going to run the wire for the cigarette lighter underneath the carpet here, just so we can use this for now, but then eventually I will cut this and then wire it. Oh, that's that, guys. Everything is back in place, and I think we can call the headliner officially done. So now on to a whole list of other things that we got going on with the car.